Anne, thanks very much for joining us. There's been a lot of focus on ESG and building back better. So how can alternative real estate sectors support the investors' sort of growing needs to address areas like social sustainability?
Well, alternative real estate has a really good head start in that many of the components are actually operational businesses such as healthcare or hospitality. And why that's important is that they actually utilise a high proportion of staff per square foot or square metre of building. And that's relevant to understanding social outcomes because in many cases we are looking at staff in those sectors who, but for these roles, would probably be the most marginalised in society. They're often roles filled by women, people whom English may not be their first language, and by people of lower socio-economic group. So exactly the sort of people for whom actually these roles give them a leg up and give them stability in their finances and a sense of well-being and satisfaction that they are gainfully employed and able to contribute fully to society.
And how can fund managers build on these existing social outcomes, I suppose, to ensure that instead of being kind of nice to have initiatives, they're actually far more embedded in strategy?
I think, well, first of all, we need managers to actually identify what social outcomes already exist. And this isn't anything new, they have existed, we just haven't found a way of identifying them. We've got tools to do that now, and what we can then do is identify the outputs, strip them back to their components, and then looking at that, we can then sort of rebuild it, focus more heavily on those areas with the aim that we can build a much fairer society, utilising investors' capital for the benefit of society, and fundamentally without impacting our clients' returns. So it is, it's not at a cost, it's a benefit to all. Some examples of that to make this a little bit more real and moving away from, say, the alternative sectors in real estate to the mainstream sectors such as retail, office or industrial. If we turn to shopping centres, a very easy way of demonstrating and delivering social impact would be for a centre manager, for example, to employ, say, young adults with learning difficulties. And through doing that, they can offer work experience or employment to a bunch of folk who historically have some of the lowest levels of employment in the UK for no good reason. Or turning to another example that I quote often because I think it's so simple but so effective, is the work of Timpson's, the shoe repairers. And one of their key components of their business is a charitable focus, but also the employment of staff who are ex-offenders. And it's really important that these staff are employed because statistically, those who have offended are the most likely to re-offend, and the societal costs are huge of that action. And by giving folk effectively a leg up, giving them security in their future, the benefits to them of their well-being and their stability are huge, but also the benefits to society. And that's an example that, I'd love others to follow. It reduces individuals' reliance on the state. It reduces individuals' reliance on things like universal credit, improves well-being, and doesn't impact profit. In fact, it probably, in my view, just makes it more palatable for investors, and that can only be a good thing. But what I would say is investors have really, themselves thought about this area of ESG and the S in ESG. They have learned a lot about it, and going back 5 years probably wouldn't challenge you much as a manager. But now they can absolutely smell a rat. They can spot those managers who are talking a good game as opposed to those who are actually doing it. So my word of caution is don't overpromise if you actually can't demonstrate it, because you will be found out very quickly.
And in terms of the challenges, Anne, what do you think is holding back companies in the real estate industry from addressing the social impact side?
Probably fear of perhaps going on a webinar or fear of being recorded or having anything in the media, when at the moment there's no true agreed definition of social impact and social sustainability. So when something isn't fully defined and agreed, it's quite risky to set your stall out as a manager and say, hey, this is what we think it is. But it does take those first movers to do it. It takes a bunch of us to do it and be brave enough to do it, and then in a few years' time reflect on what we got right, what wasn't right, and the aim being that as an industry we improve. And I think that there's good scope for that, because I look at the work that an organisation like GRES has done for the E of ESG, and they really were the industry leaders. They jumped headfirst into the environmental evidencing. They've got great support from managers, and if only someone could pick up that baton and do the same for S, which at the moment really is silent. And I think we should care, because there are so many positive lessons to learn out of the COVID epidemic, and many of them really touch the social impact and social side, and touch the sort of businesses that I spoke about earlier, such as hospitality, leisure, hotels, care. These are businesses that can demonstrate huge social benefit because of the type of staff and the number of staff they employ. And they are, they're the folk who have been really hard hit by the pandemic.
Great. It's a really interesting area to pick up on. Thanks very much for joining us, Anne.
Thank you.